the foundation of a whole region, transforming nature to industry and birthing the city of San Francisco. And perhaps, as the miners and the prospectors had delved deeper and deeper, blasting and digging and blasting again, perhaps they had disturbed something dormant, something asleep. Perhaps it wasn't an earthquake at all. Robert ran, his feet bare and bleeding as he trod on broken glass and shattered stone and splintered wood. He ran, ignoring the pain he knew was only temporary, knowing that once he had a chance to slow down and to focus, his injuries would no longer be a problem. But for now, he had to run, into the city, into the devastation, to where people needed him. And they needed him, all of them, the whole city. The earthquake had been just the start. The worst came after. Robert knew, and he knew that it had started already. The earth had moved, cracking San Francisco into 1,000,000 pieces. If that was all there was, then perhaps the city could recover, given time. If that was all there was, it wasn't. Robert reached the crest of California Street. On his right, houses and shops were missing their frontages, reduced to a collection of stacked open boxes, brick and stone spilling out across the street in great triangular piles that looked somehow organized, arranged. He glanced up and saw a bathtub in the upper grid of the building nearest, and in the next cubicle a heavy sideboard of dark wood hung over the edge, one door swinging open. The floor below, a table and a gramophone, the machine's horn lying funnel down on the floor, the edge of a rug flapping in the morning breeze. On his left, the buildings were intact, or appeared to be, until Robert noticed there was nothing left that was perpendicular, every upright now an angle, all pointing down the hill toward the city proper. "Sweet Mother of God!" Robert turned at the voice, thinking perhaps someone was talking about him, bloody, barefoot, shirtless, his blue jeans now dry but his long blonde hair still salty and crisp from the ocean. On any other day he imagined he might be arrested on a vagrancy charge, locked away for a spell with others on whom hard times had also fallen, ever since the gold had become harder and harder to steal from the ground. But not today. Today Robert was one of many battered and bruised. All down the street people stood and stared, or sat on the piles of rubble and talked and sobbed. People in suits and hats, some immaculate, having come to this vantage spot to bear witness the wrath of God. Others were monochromatic, shadows of gray and black, covered head to foot in dust. So much dust. On some the thick gray coating was splashed with blood, dark and thick. Some of the bleeding were standing, some sitting. A lot more were lying on the street and not moving, some only half visible underneath the piles of rubble. Below, down the steep slope of the street, lay the city, broken and ruptured, equal parts buildings standing proud and tall and a jagged low landscape of destruction. In the center, smoke rose, black, almost a solid curling mass, like the earthquake had opened a shaft straight down, through the crust, to hell itself. Robert rolled his neck and lifted first one foot, then another, taking the moment's pause to focus, to reach out to the world and feel it. And then someone spoke. The man waved his hat in one hand as he heaved himself up the street, shouting, calling out to anyone who would listen. The people around Robert stirred at his approach, their voices growing in a steady murmur as they turned to their companions. The man had come from the city center and was bringing news, clearly, although not any that made much sense. Robert watched as word spread from farther down the street as the shouting man passed. Some of the onlookers were confused, some frightened, some even amused. Robert had a bad feeling about the information the man brought. "Dynamite!" the man shouted as he reached the crest of the hill. Then he turned and stretched his arms out, like a preacher conducting a sermon. The crowd moved toward him, and Robert stepped back, down the street, letting people past. They all ignored him, even shirtless and bloody, but it was well not to draw too much attention, not yet. "Dynamite!" the man shouted again, and this time the crowd was more vocal in their response. "They're using dynamite! They're gonna blow up parts of the city, whole streets!" Robert gasped in surprise along with the rest. Then he turned and ran down the hill, his ruined feet healed, as he headed deeper into the city.